And thank you, Amanda, for joining and also being patient with me as we both work on 2 different slide decks and build the same content.
What does make me happy is our top 5, out of our top 5 that we separately worked on, 3 of them are the same.
Oh, sweet. Oh, that's awesome.
So, I mean, what I was going to mention is they're not the top 5, they're my favorite top 5, but these must just be your favorite top 5.
Yeah, part of it was, you know, and give some credit to Nick here as well, is Nick put together the top 10 blog posts, and my thought was maybe we talk through some of those as well if we have some extra time. And did you update the deck I had with yours, or no? I didn't realize they were different.
No, I can't even edit the slide deck.
Oh gosh, I'm the worst. All right, this is gonna be a really fun webinar.
Like,
so
that's my
comparison
really
of Nick's in mine versus yours.
Yeah, that's my really bad headshot that I don't like, and my title's wrong.
Awesome. What's your new title?
I'm the lead incident detection engineer.
Everyone on this webinar is just like, I'm leaving now. You guys are awful.
All you're doing is fighting. Why am I even here?
You're disorganized. You have 2 different slide decks. So how are we going to do this with 2 different slide decks?
You know, we'll just do it twice.
Hey, well, I think what you have is probably more important.
No, it's about the thing. I mean, okay. I told you I can talk about anything. It's fine.
All right. Well, Amanda, wait, what's your new title again?
Lead incident detection engineer.
All right, lead incident detection engineer. That means you're leading the detection. So
I'm not doing much, but I'm trying.
That's great. So we'll talk through the top. Maybe it's the top 7 if you mix our 5s. Does that sound good? And I'm Patrick, VP of Operations. You know, so I think, Amanda, you're on the back end seeing all this stuff from a customer perspective and building new detections, right?
Yes.
Across cloud and on-premise infrastructure. And then I'm on the sales and marketing side, you know, and we have engineers on that side, including historically me being a sales engineer. And so I get to spend all the time of like deploying our technology to customers and seeing all these things pop up right away. So I think it'll be a good dynamic conversation today of the things that we're commonly seeing across customers' environments from a detection response perspective. So we have this slide first, top 5 security detections. I thought you built this because I didn't build this. so I'm super confused. But somebody built this. Thank you, somebody. Which is a summary of the 5 that I put together. So, you know, some of the ones we're going to talk through, you know, just high level, talking about some recon scanning, and we'll talk about, like, we're not talking about all recon scanning, right? And we'll hop into what that means, talking about honeypot access, malicious DLL detection on Windows hosts, authentication outside your country or region. We have US here because a lot of US entities might be US only operating. And then the last one we have on here is potential malicious executable files. Amanda, what else is on your list that we're missing?
I did PowerShell exec bypass and creating inbox roles.
Great.
Because those are 2 that actually found
forwarding email.
Yeah, because those 2 legitimately across several customers have found legitimate attacks recently.
Sweet. So let's start talking about these 5, and then we'll talk about. I love the one you mentioned too, which is real creation. Things like mailbox forwarding and email, and things like Office 365 and G Suite. So let's start at the top, number 5. And also I would say, you know, everyone on here, feel free to interact. We have the chat. We have Q&A. So if you interact via either of those, you'll get us, and we'll incorporate it in the conversation too. Next all right, so malicious executable files. Where do you look for these, and what are some of the tools you use, and what does it look like from a customer standpoint?
So this one kind of depends on what they're running for endpoint solutions, right? I mean, you have a lot of the main ones listed here. Another really good one is Windows Defender. is pretty high fidelity and finds some really good, it stops most of them when you're actually trying to do attacking from a Windows box. You have to turn off a lot if you don't have an aftermarket endpoint solution. So yeah, a lot of these like Carbon Black response specifically, and a little bit in defense, sorry, has some automation where you can, either block the executable, or you can, set the device to be, partitioned off and kind of, get it away from being able to spread into the rest of the network. I'm not too familiar.
I got a question on this, and this is
Okay,
fundamental, but like when we're talking about, just for everyone on the call, right? We're talking about Windows hosts, I assume, and this could be server or workstation.
which is, I mean, yeah. I mean, 95% of endpoints in the enterprise, at least that I've seen over the last 10 years, have been Windows. I don't know that all of these have Linux endpoint stuff, but maybe they do. I don't want to be wrong.
No, I think that's fair. And my other question is like, is any of this done through logs, or this is all done really to making sure you have any next gen EDR in place, right?
Yeah, but the next gen EDRs don't. While they do find a lot, they can be really super high when it comes to false positives, which can be hard to manage also. So I think combining that with what we're doing with logs is a little bit more helpful, because then you have like two groups of people, sets of eyes on it, right? You don't have just like the one person that goes into Carbon Black console every, once a week to whitelist stuff, but you have, additional intelligence on top of that from the searches that we put together.
Cool. Yeah, and I think the one I didn't put Windows Defender on here because like it's hard to find a good logo.
You're right. They don't really have a logo.
We can add that to the list, right?
Write it in
for full context. Anytime I'm on a call with a customer, right, it's always asking what do you use in the space. If it's nothing, it's like you probably should go buy something for your endpoints, right? And on the Blumira side right now, we support all these things. Sentinel-1 is the only one we are working on right now to build an integration for in the near future. So
yep.
Cool. Make sure your endpoints are covered. I think the other thing is making sure they're up to date. Would be the other one.
And your licensing is active.
What's licensing have to do with it? Does that make sure it gets up to date?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. I'm not a Windows person. So I haven't used a Windows device other than like a server in a long time. All right, cool. The next one we have is out of region, country, second factor or multi-factor.
Mm-hmm.
So curious to hear from your perspective, like why look for this and why is it particularly important? And what type of customer profile?
Yeah, we have a couple different customer profiles. Some of them are like outside of the US, right? And then others have very long and very specific whitelists when it comes to what they want allowed and not actually alerted on when it comes to this stuff. So like we have one customer that gave us a very long list of these are the people that are allowed to do multi-factor auth from India, and these are the ones from the Philippines, and this is from Mexico. So we can kind of go through and be like, okay, well, when you get rid of all of those, then you actually get into the actual malicious attempts. And you can actually pair this. There's another one that we do too that is, I know Duo does it, and I think there's another two-factor auth that does it too, but it tells you can report when it's a fraudulent attempt, right? When it pops up and like, was this you? No, like you don't do the second factor auth. You click this is fraud. So pairing that along with this is really a good idea. We caught a few recently. I think it was last week or the week before. One was an actual legitimate attempt, and the user went and reset their password everywhere. And then the other one was just pen tests from like a third party.
Yeah, and I think the way to think about this for most people is like understanding your attack surface, right? Like
Mhm.
a good example is we have customers that might be a city or a county. They might be a manufacturer in the US only. And so like, you know, for most organizations, especially small and medium-sized businesses, it's most the traffic is going to come from in country or in region or a specific area. And so I think the main thing, you know, to point out there is it's the anomalies of like when something happens outside of that. And the second factor piece, what we're talking about is like they're basically getting past the primary cred or primary credential at that point. So high likelihood of gaining access. And then I think the other thing is, yeah, what places you look at this. So it's going to be across things like Azure and Duo, Okta, and your cloud applications, Office 365 and G Suite. Really anything that's going to be web facing, right, is where this is going to apply.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have a global presence, sometimes this is just near to impossible to implement. You know, you have to have user behavioral analytics to kind of suss that out. It's not something that you can really easily do manually.
Yep. Hey, I got some questions, and all of them are about endpoints. People are more excited about the malicious executable file. One of the questions from our friend Scott says, do you recommend using multiple systems for the endpoints? I'm sure you have an interesting perspective on this, Amanda.
Like I'm guessing you mean like multiple vendors for endpoint solutions. Going based on no, like it's not really worth the money, I don't think. Just pick whatever. Oh, Windows Defender. Yeah, like if you do Windows Defender and something else, definitely. Although Windows Defender is pretty good. Just going based on personal.
Bill says that you should put semantic containium.
Yeah.
If you have deep pockets.
Yeah. Right.
I love it.
Like you wouldn't want to do a carbon black and a silence at the same time. But yeah, like
it's probably a lot, like you're gonna get duplicate alerts, right? Most likely in that point, and then maybe some additional value.
And that's a lot. That's a lot of money. I don't know that there's much additional value there, and they fight.
Well, if you had all the money in the world, would you deploy 2 endpoint agents?
No, because they fight with each other too. Like I mean,
I think it depends on your organization, but for most organizations, right, they have a tough time managing one product, let alone 2 products that are doing the same thing.
Yep.
It is, you know, one thing to take into consideration there. And then our friend Jeremy, do traditional AVs like Webroot, Bitdefender, ESET, Sophos, et cetera, have the APIs or gather enough telemetry to make an integration worthwhile?
I don't want to make any specific recommendations on camera. Some of them are really bad. Some of them are, as far as logging goes. Sophos has some really good platforms, and others not so much. I know their older one that they're getting away from was terrible. So you don't have to worry about that one anymore. What they're turning to has a lot more information. I've not actually seen Bitdefender and Webroot. ESET has a good amount of information, but there's not. We do have an API integration for ESET and Sophos both. I don't know about the other 2.
Yeah, and you can shame vendors. They just need to make, you know, provide better data and provide better APIs a lot of times. Like even like I've worked at companies where we had an API in the past and we didn't provide all the stuff we should have until much later. And so sometimes you just have to kind of vendor shame a little bit your vendors and say, hey, look, I need this, or I need to be able to gather this. I think, and I don't know if this is a joke or serious, but I think it's more like sarcasm. Arlie said 1 tool to troubleshoot and 1 to tune. And maybe he's serious, but I think you meant that's meant to be a joke because nobody has time. Arlie, let me know if and then Arlie mentioned single source, so let me know if I interpreted your comment properly there. And then there's some other ones. I don't know. There's so many questions on this side. So Yeah, good feedback. I'm trying to think if there's anything else you see on the endpoint side. Not speaking of any efficacy of the tools, just whether or not it's worth getting info from them, since a big chunk of SMB are still on those baseline antiviruses.
Wait.
You still there, Amanda?
Yeah, sorry.
You're like, doesn't change my view.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on our side, we tell everyone to integrate so we get as much information as we can, right? But it just depends on what product is and the limitations to it. And then also the products often change their APIs or change the data sets, so we respond to
Like
that as well.
Defender and ATP, all of the Microsoft endpoint / security products, I think out of all of the ones I've seen, provide the most logging if we want to go on volume.
Because more is better, right?
Because more is better. Like I would rather get all of the information as opposed to just, yeah, I don't know. I like more logs.
I was kind of joking, but
no, seriously,
I think
logs.
Yeah, it's funny because our service is kind of designed where like more is better, right?
Yeah.
But traditionally speaking, most people can't handle more in this space, and you don't want more alerts that are false positives, for example, with some of the traditional solutions out there. There was some comments too. I think Arlie mentioned on the outside of region, like the other aspect here is detecting geo-impossible logins or things that are suspect and not normal. Have been incredibly useful as well. And so we'll hop in. We were talking about endpoints, so like this should excite everybody some more, which is Reg Server 32 malicious DLL, which like, hey, make it stupid simple so I can understand. Amanda?
So I personally don't like this detection yet because I've not been able to, yeah, I know. It can be very noisy because Windows by default uses Reg Server 32 to, register all of the DLLs. So it's hard to find actionable intelligence when it comes to this unless you're using
all right, just for the record, we're listening.
Highly
we can update
tuned.
this
No.
as we go.
Highly tuned, this could be helpful because there's what is it? Why can I not think of the red team tool?
Just in the future, if we ever use this again, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, so what's your replacement one that you had on your list that wasn't this one?
My replacement one was the PowerShell execution bypass.
And what's partial execution bypass? Because that's on Windows as well, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. So we've actually been able to tune that and only find, like, we have a couple customers that run PowerShell all the time and always try and bypass the execution policy. But there's ways you can get around that. But yeah, we've found several different legitimate attacks on external like web servers and stuff that ransomware and malware use this all the time, where they'll bypass the execution policy in a PowerShell script, and not just bypassing the policy, but they do other things like encoding commands and downloading, stuff via hyperlinks and Bitly, stuff. So that one's been pretty good. I like that one just because it's easier to tune. Like if you have, if you happen to run, 1 million PowerShell commands across your environment all the time, you can actually add your own switches. Be like, there's like a command switch that you can run, a comment switch that you can run inside the PowerShell script that we could just ignore. Be like, this is, company / whatever PowerShell script. And then it makes it easier to whitelist, and like an attacker isn't going to know to put that in their command line.
So it's similar, like it's kind of similar in your regards to like whitelisting for an internal vuln scanning almost. Right?
Kinda.
It's like, oh hey, we see it, it's happening all the time. Let's apply a rule so that noise doesn't show up, but it still shows up if there's exceptions outside of that. So
yeah.
Cool, which I mean, that's kind of where we're going next. I think the other important thing here is like, and this has to do with both number 5 as well as number 3. We are talking predominantly with Windows hosts here. And one thing I think people forget a lot of times that I see is like, they think of like, oh, my Windows hosts on premise, and then they forget about their Windows hosts that are in Azure.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something to be mindful about, is like making sure you deploy EDR in both places, as well as deploying effective logging and threat detection like Blumira, because yeah, too often than not, it's like, oh, I don't need to worry about that. That's in Azure. You still
Somebody
have the
else's cloud.
same risks. Yep. And the hosts most likely have the same vulnerabilities or same risk of being compromised, or in some cases more. Cool. All right, next one, anomalous honeypot access.
I like this.
Yeah, talk to me about honeypots. What's a honeypot do, and what does it mean to access it
Actually, I don't know if
anonymously?
we're allowed to say yet or not, but we just updated our honeypots. I'm just gonna say it anyways because I already did. Executive decision. Yeah, we just updated our honeypot modules, or where we are tomorrow, to include even more stuff. But this is one of the alerts that we have automatically on our honeypots that we deploy to our sensors. And one is the anomalous access. So this is, I think that one's just people scanning directories on it, and attempting, to see what's on that IP address. So in the beginning, we only had, I think, 3 different capabilities of that honeypot, this being one. I think there was like an FTP and something else. I can't remember. SSH maybe. But I think we're adding another 5 capabilities to it, which is super cool. And it's really easy to deploy. You can kind of—
Hey, where do you suggest putting honeypots?
Not on the internet unless you're a security researcher.
Yeah, I think that's a misconnect. Like, often people are like, oh yeah, honeypot, great idea, you put this on the internet, right? And it's like, no, the whole point is to detect someone internally.
You can put it on the internet if you want to use that for research and not detection.
Yeah, and you wouldn't use Blumira in that way.
And you wouldn't you don't put our honeypots on the internet, because then you'll just get an obscene amount of alerting.
Yeah, and I think if you want to do research and play with the honeypot, it's like, go download Open Canary. We use that ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the main thing is like any network segment that's going to have anything critical on it, you probably want to deploy a honeypot on. And then also, same thing, putting a honeypot, for instance, in your Azure environment, AWS, other cloud infrastructure as well, is going to help you detect when someone's trying to get access to something they shouldn't probably have.
Yeah, and on top of like full honeypots, there's honey tokens and stuff that you can use too and generate yourself. Isn't really part of what we do yet, but it can be ingested with logs that we can end up using. So
yeah. And once again, I think like the Open Canary side, or Canary, has the honey tokens, so you can play around with those. Haroon's a good friend of ours. Tech is legit and good.
And good point in the Q&A, honey creds too.
Yep.
Is it canarytoken.io or canary token something that has a whole bunch of honey stuff?
I think if you Google Canary Tokens, you will likely find the first one is, I would guess, Haroon's, but thanks, canarytokens.org. And it's a minute. I think on the cred side is interesting. That's essentially getting AWS creds that you place in different spots in order to be notified of detection when someone tries to use them.
Ooh, that's a good idea. A blog on how to use honey tokens with Blumira. I like that. I do have to write a blog that's due next week, so I might steal that idea.
It's good. And then oh wow, we got a bunch more Q&A. polygaki.com/open canary honeypot on Raspberry Pi. Yeah, and I think, like, Canary themselves are there, like, if you want to do a ton of different stuff, those really have a much broader capability. And I think some of the stuff you mentioned we're adding likely as well.
Yep.
Sweet. Number one. Wait, is this one you didn't want to put on here too?
It's a good one. It's just not one that I had listed.
No, it's good. And then we can go over what other things you listed. So yeah, I think, in this instance, there's a misconception where people are like, I want to detect all recon scanning on the internet. And first off, we can talk a little bit, Amanda, like what does that look like if you try and detect everything?
Very loud. I remember the last place that I worked for, we had several customers, very, very large customers that wanted alerted every time it happened. And not only did they want it alerted every time it happened, we also managed their firewalls. So we had to go in manually and add each individual IP address to a list every time it triggered, which was a lot of work and such a huge pain in the butt. But the one that I added to mine that was kind of close to this, I can't even remember what it was, but it ended with the same thing. It's basically, scanning from the internet, right? Which is nice when you have a dynamic block list set up, or I guess inversely, you could set up for outbound stuff, you could set up DNS sinkholes. But yeah, we have the ability, as opposed to just, having to make a change on all of your firewalls every time this triggers, for it to automatically add stuff to the block list. And this is nice. We also have an internal one that kind of does the same thing as port scanning, but not necessarily. And yeah, it's helpful to look for, they're trying to see what kind of, web services you have online or whatever.
Hey, I got a question. So like when for instance, like when someone's trying to set, when we're doing this for a customer, or when they're trying to do this with other products, where are you detecting public to private recon? Is that on the firewall logs, or is that more on the Windows and Linux logs, or is it both?
It's either fire. So this one in particular that we have does firewall logs, IIS, Apache, and something else. I can't remember. Whatever.
And IIS and Apache is from Windows and Linux hosts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's multiple ways you can detect this, from the firewall as well as the host logs.
Yep.
And I think this also ties up with like internet connections to RDP or SMB connections, right? Which also are commonly found, and you should never expose SMB or RDP to the internet. But the reality is like
it happens.
A lot of organizations do. And I don't think they intend to. Yeah, I think they misconfigure something, or they don't realize that RDP and SMB are not secure to be published on the internet.
No, and we also had one recently that they don't manage their own firewall. They have a third-party vendor that does it.
Oh, interesting. So then they discovered, hey, the firewall is not configured properly. Firewall management, it's an interesting one, because I think more than often than not, when that gets outsourced, it can, when it's insourced too, I think either way, there's enough room on firewall rules for it to be a significant risk if it's configured wrong. So
firewalls are hard. Just ask my hosting provider.
Yeah.
That I yelled at this morning.
I had an experience where I had, this was years ago, but I had a customer that didn't realize they configured their firewall to have an inbound rule of any, which basically means you don't have a firewall. And it was like months later until they discovered that.
How does that take months?
And in addition to that, they also were like ITAR, like they were supposed to comply with ITAR and stuff. It was just like absolute disaster, right? it was really something else. But the reality is that that kind of stuff does happen. Hey, what else is on your list that I didn't cover? Or did we
I
didn't
don't
cover
know.
on
I
the slides?
closed. Oh no, I didn't close it. Honeypots. We did that. No, we got them all. Oh, password spraying.
Password spraying is a good one.
Yeah.
And I think that goes kind of with the authentication side of like outside region country, but different, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, what does password spraying look like?
I
Where
mean-
do you look for it, and how do you detect it?
I mean, everywhere. You know, we have the same way we do dynamic blacklist with the public to private recon. We do it. We can do it with password spraying too, especially like with OWA access. You know, if you have Outlook web access and like Exchange internally or something.
Or do you mean Outlook.com?
No, different. So there's O365 OWA, and then there's internal, like I have my own Exchange server OWA, and they have a million services, and now they're all called something different, and I get all messed up. But yeah, we have a password spraying that's good internally and externally, like a one to many or a many to one type of connection, depending on if it's brute forcing or password spraying or whatever. They're good to look out for, especially if there's successful authentication attempts afterwards.
So typically, is that going to be your Azure AD and Active Directory is where you're going to detect
Everything.
that? But what the logs?
Everything
wise?
that has a user, a username and, you know, failure code, right? You could
Okay.
do it against Duo, you could do it against Office 365 or Azure, or we have a password spraying for like PowerShell connections to your Azure servers. Like there's a bunch of different kinds of password spraying that you can kind of detect.
Yep. And then what do you do with password spraying? Like, what actions do you
Freak
take?
out? No.
And hey, why would you want to
Depends.
detect password spraying when you have multi-factor authentication?
Because some people don't implement multi-factor authentication correctly.
I think that's one reason. I think the other thing is like password spraying leads to compromised primary credential, and then they figure out a way to compromise the secondary, so they're halfway there.
Because they can just find a system that doesn't have two-factor auth deployed to it.
Well, that's one, and you're completely right. Is a lot of people don't configure MFA in the right way or the right areas. The other one I'm referring to is we did a webinar recently with I think it was Megan at Networks Group, and literally it's like, oh, once I bypass primary with password spraying, I just call the person and tell them I'm help desk and ask for the passcode that I just sent them via text message, and they give it to me every time, or they press the approve button. So I do think, I do think people overlook that people are much more sophisticated nowadays and find ways to bypass two-factor as well.
Yep.
And so like it's making sure the primary credential is continue to be strong even when there is a second factor. So Bill mentioned credential stuffing. What's the difference
Between credential stuffing?
Yeah, I'm just putting you on the spot here.
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't. So we have password spraying is when you have a whole big list of random stuff. Credential stuffing is usually when you have a list of known good credentials or previously used credentials.
Okay. And they use this, then they just submit them similar, so it's pretty much the same detection?
Yeah, and then you can use, you also have like brute forcing, which is like AA1. Like you just go down the list of a million things.
And how hard is it to actually run these things?
I mean, I'm not great at attack methodology or doing anything, and I can do it. So it's not super.
Oh, all right.
I mean, if you want like a low barrier to entry, password spraying, super easy.
No, I look at it. It's like, yeah, all you need is a teenager that's stuck at home on Zoom.
If this is something that I think
and has a half hour of time, and they're a hacker all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably get my mom to do it. Just like step by
This
step.
could be, hey, that could be an interesting live stream.
Like teach your mom how to password spray.
it. That's funny. Yeah, you gotta learn the fun things. Anything else on your list that's not on here?
No, most of ours are the same.
Nothing.
See, we're on the same wavelength.
No, it's good. I think there's a few more on Nick's list, and I couldn't find the blog post, but maybe we didn't publish it yet. But anomalous server path access. I don't know what that is.
That's kind of like this one. Well, that's like the honeypot one that you did.
Okay.
The honeypot one is anomalous.
And then I think this is late stage ransomware attack. We see this often as administrator level account addition or creation, and that only is not Active Directory. That's also Azure AD and G Suite across the board.
Yep.
But yeah, if you're not validating new administrator users, and what I find is most people don't realize that it's like, oh, I didn't even think about that, and I don't get visibility into account creation. Definitely a good way to deploy ransomware across all your hosts once you get that access. So two other ones, null session activity.
Oh, are you going through the whole blog post?
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Oh, all right.
I like to put you on the spot. We have a few extra minutes and I'm gonna hop on.
Null session activity is good. It's not, I want to say it's not so prevalent anymore because of newer Windows Server, but there are a lot of environments that do have older versions. And depending on what you're using to do the attack. So there's a couple different tools that you can do. And if you're not a experienced pen tester, you end up leaving your Kali box name the same. So you can always detect based on just the workstation name Kali in the Windows logs. So if you do any attacking, make sure you change that. But yeah, you can still tell based on the Windows logs who's trying to do null session attack, and that allows you to very quickly get domain admin on a server.
I think it's kind of interesting. I was laughing while we were saying that. You're like, oh, but the new Windows, as if everybody has on newer Windows and stays up to date.
Mm-hmm.
Last night I went skateboarding and I was with my cousin Stevie, and I should be careful. That's probably too much to disclose, even saying the statement. But basically, it was like, oh yeah, someone I know has point of sale systems which are running on Vista, and I'm like, it's sometimes the reality of what we live in, right? Is that should never be a thing. And so pretty, I think pretty comical statement there of like, yeah, the reality is, not every organization is running up-to-date software either. So that might not apply. When's the last time you used Windows Vista?
Oh gosh. I don't even remember. I was in the help desk, I think. It's gotta be 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, when that came up, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, someone's skimming credit cards there. A Vista machine. I mean, that's been sitting there for 10 years. No, this is cool. Last one, 25 window account lockouts over a period of time. I think this is 12 hours. But why is that important?
Yeah, so there's a couple worms that do that. I worked at an organization for a while that had God, what is it called? Not Sasser. Great. Now I can't remember the name of it. Configure. Thank you. I always forget the name of Configure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, thank you, Arlie. That we had a device be shipped to us from a medical manufacturer, and somebody logged in with domain admin to add it to the domain, and it just took those credentials and locked out all of the accounts everywhere on like a recurring basis that it could get access to. So that's not the only thing that does that. So, I mean, it could just be a misconfiguration of a tool, or it could be, yeah, it was definitely hospital. And it was a big vendor too. It was like they're in the Forbes top 50, I think, that sent us configure, and we paid for it. But yeah, that's definitely something that's usually bad when you have a bunch of account lockouts all at once.
Hey, and then Jeremy asked the question, would things like Mimikatz, Cobalt Strike, et cetera, raise detection alerts in the same way you described, Callie?
Not, I mean, depends on where they run it from. Cobalt Strike has its own kind of signatures. It's not usually the workstation name. But I mean, depending on what you do and don't configure in Cobalt Strike, it can be easy or difficult to detect. And Mimikatz is just detected with either Windows logs or like IPS, IDS signatures, if they do like full packet captures or something.
Cool. And I think Mimikatz is a lot of times detected via EDR, right?
Depends on the EDR. And how it's configured too.
Okay, no, that's good. Any configuration tips on the EDR side? Depends on the EDR.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I'm gonna hop in and just highlight and show a few of the things on the Blumira side in which we help with in the areas, some of the areas we talked about. And just want to emphasize on our side, like what we do is essentially ingest all these different data points: firewall, EDR, Windows logs, cloud infrastructure, all that fun stuff. And if you think about it, it's more or less analyzing big data sets to surface real risk from a security perspective, and then helping and enabling organizations to investigate and respond, and doing it in a matter of hours to get to detection. And unfortunately, with most products in the space, that's not a reality. Fortunate for us, but I think that's one of the big challenges when we're talking about detecting some of these threats for organizations. And we do that in helping both on the customer side as well as help with managed service providers too that are providing services with their customers. Some of the things I'd highlight on the cloud security side, like we're doing more and more in this area. We talked a bit about Azure, the different products of Defender, Windows Defender for endpoints, they call it now. Used to be, I think, Windows Defender ATP. You have Defender for the Windows itself, and then some of the other ATP products where there's APIs available. But also on the password spraying sort of side of things, like people often overlook not only Active Directory but Azure AD, Office 365, G Suite. VPNs, really any point where there's external access. And so we help with both the cloud security side and monitoring as well as on-premise. And you can essentially
a lot of those cloud vendors do have really, really good logging.
Yeah, that's what's great with the newer cloud vendors is they take it a bit more seriously. Sometimes it can be hard to figure out though too.
Yep.
And then one thing I would emphasize as well is like AWS with us coming in addition to Azure pretty soon in this space as well. So something we've had a lot of customers looking for. I'm gonna hop and show some of the, as far as helping deploy quickly, eliminate noise and take action. Some of the types of threats we detect, which I'll hop in and show some examples. Ransomware is probably the #1 thing that people are concerned about from a threat perspective today. And almost any of these things can be used in a ransomware attack. But these are good examples, high level, of some of the techniques and tactics. And the things we talked about, like recon scanning, brute force attacks, password spraying, account lockout attempts, as you had mentioned, exploits. And then more commonly than not, misconfigurations, right? Of RDP, SMB, privileged access, those.
And I think we counted yesterday or the day before. We're up to like over 200 different detections now.
Sweet. and high accurate, I think, is important there. On the detection side, just to show on the Blumira product, so I'm going to show just a few different examples of things we talked about today. So, you know, honeypot file access was one of them we brought up. But to hop in, you know, here's an example of password spraying. And what's really interesting here is it takes it a step further. So if you do have a next-gen firewall, for instance, we're seeing password spraying on a VPN. We're providing the context and analysis, and then you can block this attack if you integrate with the dynamic block list, as Amanda has mentioned. And you can take it a step further where you can actually configure the block list so it's automated from an actions perspective, so it doesn't require a human to be sitting there validating and then applying those IP addresses. And so that's the whole premise, is, you know, trying to automate as many of these things as you can to reduce your attack surface. And then taking it a step further on the dynamic block list, also we have about 15 threat feeds that we correlate that you can apply and block that are known bad IP addresses as well, which is just knocking out a lot of low-hanging fruit from a threat perspective. So if you're on and you're a customer and you haven't configured this, you should configure it because it's included in the product. If you're not, just something educational to know and be aware of. Maybe some other stuff I can show too. Any other ones that are interesting to you, Amanda? Here's your recon scanning, right?
Yeah, that one adds in threat lists though.
Oh, so it's providing the threat feed that it's also coming from.
Yep.
Cool. And you could click to do this or automate it as well, and on that side of things. And then I think we have some, I mean, this is Mimikatz credential stealing, right? So this is normally, my understanding, going to come off the AV logs or the EDR logs. Is that right?
Or Windows. We have our own like IOCs that we can look for too in Windows.
Yep. And I mean, like, this is kind of nice too, which is validation of like, what version of Windows are you on? You know, do you have the right patches installed so you can proceed to the next question and know what to do? Even if you don't have the expertise necessarily. So cool. One or two more I'm gonna show as I scroll down. We talked a little bit about unfeasible location or outside a certain region that's defined as we're interacting with customers. So in this instance, right, you know, you can see in the logs, someone's logging in from 2 different locations, which isn't feasible in the same period of time. So that's a good indicator that account's being compromised or someone's sharing their account. That's another thing commonly seen. I actually saw someone get fired over a detection like this before.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, basically what ended up happening was in this case, they actually they traveled there really quickly between here and Brazil. And then it triggered an alert to the security team who went to the HR team to confirm some of the stuff. And they found out the employee was working out of Brazil when they were supposed to be in the US. So it was kind of interesting situation. And I think times have changed where, like, I don't know, that's probably more acceptable nowadays. But and then I think the other thing is shared credentials, which is a big no-no, right? Hiring a contractor to do your work. Can be another reason why this is happening, which organizations don't want to see. So it is kind of interesting sometimes how security ties to HR, or can tie to HR as well in these functions.
I keep on trying to outsource my work, but you put me on camera, so I can't find anybody that looks enough like me.
You know what? We need to make you into one of those like VR bots.
Yeah, no, that's
so, like,
terrible idea.
Yeah,
right
basically.
That, I can think of very many reasons why that's a bad idea.
Yeah, and then like you got to do voice changing as well. So the person sounds like you too. Hey, Jeremy asked, Blumira has the ability to collect logs from all Windows endpoints or just servers?
Everything that you want to add NX log to or configure WEF or whatever way you want to get us logs, anything. We have a handful of
super
people
excited.
that have it on all endpoints, not just servers.
No, that's good. I'm kind of excited too. I just noticed we are starting to use the new terminology of reporting.
I know.
And
I know.
consistently, report builder. We used to call this data, and people are like, "Where are the reports?" And so it's cool to see us continuing to update from a product perspective. I'm sure people on the phone that are customers are appreciative of that too.
I mean, I am too, because I don't use the front end very often, and when I do, I'm like, I don't know where anything is.
Yeah, and on the note of, I got a smiley face from Arlie. On the note of the logging piece, we have a sensor, and so you can forward really anything from a syslog in. So a lot of times your firewalls, for instance, your Windows logs via NX log, and then the other aspect is modules. So we talked about, Carbon Black. You just put in your API keys and it's done. Right. And so the assumption is really you don't have to do any work other than getting logs to us, and then interacting with us on upfront of like, hey, we noticed some false positives, or maybe you notice some noise that needs to be adjusted, tweaked, and tuned. But that's really our value proposition, is making it easy to use and leverage. So, and detecting on all the threats and continuing growing, as you kind of mentioned, over 200 at this point across on-premise and cloud infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So cool. Well, anything else you want to add, Amanda, as far as other top observations, security detections, that sort of stuff?
No, I don't think so.
Nothing at all.
Just nobody turned me into a VR bot.
Turn you into a bot?
Nobody turned me into a VR bot. It's my only request.
See, it's crazy because nowadays that's actually feasible. Like when I first started at Duo 8 years ago, like the most bot thing you could do is they configured like an IRC chat bot to make a pizza order over the phone. Yeah, nowadays, like, oh man, it's wild. I think I was driving in my Tesla last night in autopilot, and just sit there and think, it's like, wow, this is like the future. I'm not driving, I'm just sitting here, and to be able to trust things do that. But yeah, it is an interesting time, and I'm sure technology will just keep on advancing in these regards. So cool. I don't see any other questions. I think we're about at time. Thank you, Amanda, for putting this together and duplicating our work.
I mean, I have to say your slides are much prettier than mine.
All right. I'm kind of curious, like, I think I used maybe 2 slides, or someone else, maybe Alicia even hopped in and edited and created some of the stuff. So I'll credit to them for making it look good. And thanks everybody for joining today. Have a great day and rest of your week. And hopefully the sun's shining for you wherever you're located. I'm in Michigan, and it's happening to shine right now, which is rare during this time of year. So cool.
Oh yeah.
Is it sunny there, Amanda?
Yeah, ish.
Sunny-ish. All right. Well, thank you.
All right.